Okay, I guess we can get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. I have some formal comments that I'll make, and then I'm going to introduce our special guest. As you know, last month I announced a series of immediate actions to address issues related to the use of segregation in Ontario's adult correctional institutions. At that time, I also announced that the province would be retaining an independent reviewer to further examine the use of segregation in our institutions, building on the work already underway in our ministry. So I am pleased to announce today that Howard Sapers, who is the Correctional Investigator of Canada, has accepted the task of helping our government overhaul how segregation is used in Ontario as an independent advisor on corrections reform. As part of this work, we have asked Mr. Sapers to review the use of all forms of segregation and also to identify opportunities for the longer-term reform of Ontario's correctional services. This includes measures to reduce the number of people held in all forms of segregation and the length of time spent there, to improve the conditions under which inmates in segregation are held, to build a system where appropriate alternatives to segregation are identified and made available for vulnerable inmates and where segregation is only used in rare circumstances, to improve oversight of inmates and correctional institutions in relation to segregation, and to ensure the safety and well-being of all staff and inmates, to strengthen the staffing model both in relation to training and recruitment to align with a modernized approach to segregation and to better support vulnerable inmates, as well as to provide advice on any policies, regulations, or legislation that should be updated as a result of this review. We are working with Mr. Sapers to transition him to this new role, including ensuring that he is fully briefed on current issues regarding the use of segregation in Ontario's correctional facilities and on the internal review done to date by our ministry. Mr. Sapers will provide us with an interim report within 60 days of his start date, which will be January 1st, 2017. That report will detail current challenges related to segregation, including an evaluation of actions to date to determine if there are more changes that could be implemented immediately, as well as opportunities to reduce the use of segregation. A final report and recommendations will support both segregation reform and longer-term reforms to our correctional system. This report will form the basis of government action, and we will work with Mr. Sapers to develop a phased implementation based on the plan. The final report will be completed in the spring of next year, and Mr. Sapers, as you will come to know very shortly, brings a wealth of experience to this position, and we will benefit greatly from his knowledge, insight, and expertise. Mr. Sapers was a member of Alberta's Legislative Assembly. He has worked for the National Crime Prevention Centre, has served on the National Parole Board, and in 2004 was appointed by the federal government to be the Ombudsman for Federal Offenders. That expertise will now come to Ontario. So I want to take a minute and personally thank Mr. Sapers for taking on this important task, and I'd now like to call Mr. Sapers to the podium to make a few remarks. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Minister. I'd like to thank both the Premier and the Minister for the confidence that they've expressed in me and for the opportunity to take on this important work. I've accepted this assignment because I know that high-quality correctional services contribute to a healthier and a safer community. I believe I can help identify some of the current gaps and problems and some of the solutions to address those problems. I share the government's goal to reduce the use of segregation and to improve the care and custody of those who must be housed separately from others while in Ontario's correctional facilities. This is a timely and a pressing issue. It's not only here, but across Canada and abroad. For the last 12 years, I've served as Canada's correctional investigator. It's been a very difficult decision for me to leave this role, but I think the time is right. My experience in investigating the use of segregation, use of force, deaths in custody, the provision of mental health care services behind bars, and how to best respond to high-needs offenders will serve me well as I conduct this review. I know Ontario has already undertaken considerable work in the area of segregation and broader correctional reforms. I was pleased to see that this work has resulted in some immediate changes, including segregation will only be used as a measure of last resort and will only be used under the least restrictive conditions available. A limit of 15 consecutive days in disciplinary segregation will be established, and a weekly segregation review committee will be in place in each and every institution. I'm looking forward to building on these reforms and the other work that has already been undertaken. As the Minister mentioned, I have a clear mandate not only to make recommendations, but to work with the Ministry to develop an implementation plan that will help Ontario make the necessary changes to reform its use of segregation and the correctional system more broadly. Finally, I want to emphasize that improving conditions of confinement also means improving the working conditions for the men and women who serve the public in Ontario's jails. I'm looking forward to starting this essential work and to contributing to achieving excellence in Ontario's corrections system. Thank you for this opportunity to make these few comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Howard. Appreciate it. Thank you. So, folks, we have a few minutes. We'll take a few questions, and we can simply decide who's best suited to answer them here. So happy to take a few of your questions if you have any.
Mr. Sabers, what would an alternative to segregation be, particularly for somebody that's a vulnerable inmate?
There's a number of alternatives. Some of them are already in place. Some of them are in other jurisdictions that aren't used here. More therapeutic environments, more time out of the cell, fewer restrictions on movement and association, more therapeutic supports. Case by case, there's a number of things that can be done and are being done, and I think we can take best practices from some other places and tailor them to fit well here in Ontario.
I'm curious to know a little bit more about what prompted your decision to come to the provincial side of things. I know you've been working particularly on segregation as well in the federal capacity. I mean, is it just that the need is so great in Ontario? Can you explain why you decided to do that?
Yeah, well, it's a tremendous opportunity and a tremendous challenge. I appreciated being asked to consider it. I gave it a lot of thought, and it made sense to me to come and do this piece of work.
How will what you'll be doing any different than what the government's already done?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
How will what you'll be doing be any different than what the government's already done?
Well, I guess we'll find out in about a year or so. But I do think that it takes some focus and some experience. And there's only been, for example, 3 correctional investigators in the history of Canada. So I've had the job for the last 12 years. That gives you a pretty unique insight into the kinds of operations and the kinds of issues that we're talking about here. I hope to leverage that experience and contribute to the reforms that Ontario government is already committed to.
Would you like to see a permanent investigator in Ontario prisons?
I don't want to prejudice the outcome of the review. There's lots of things that I have in mind, but I want to approach this with an open mind and wide open eyes and follow the evidence.
I seem to recall you previously calling for legislated caps on segregation. Was that just disciplinary, or should that be considered for administrative as well?
The Office of the Correctional Investigator has made a number of recommendations for hard caps on administrative segregation. So those would be in terms of the number of placements, the consecutive days it could be in segregation, and also the individuals who could be segregated, so certain vulnerable populations perhaps being excluded from that. But that's in the federal context. I'm going to have to get into the reality in the provincial context and then determine whether or not those recommendations would be applicable here as well, or something different.
Are you looking at for Ontario, possibly?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the question's a good one. We've asked Mr. Sapers, and I want to be clear as well, that there are no restrictions or limitations in terms of what Mr. Sapers can review or have access to. We want him to have access to all of the institutions, all of the information that we have in our ministry, and that this is a very open and transparent process, and that any recommendations regarding legislative changes that could come forward following that, the government will make every effort to implement and will take obviously very seriously. So from our perspective, I think we're very, very fortunate to have someone of Mr. Saper's caliber undertaking this review in Ontario, and we welcome the advice and information that will be coming, and we know that 60 days out from January 1st, there will be preliminary information that will come back to the ministry about potentially what further changes could be made. Obviously, that will be information that we will make publicly available as well, a summary of that information or the recommendations that would be contained therein. So, you know, we're pleased with the progress in regard to where we are at on this, and you know, I'm very, very optimistic that the expertise that Mr. Sapers brings to our ministry will help us further move forward on the path that we are on in the ministry in terms of the work that has been done, but will give us some more tangible and concrete recommendations that can then be acted on by government. And that does include potential legislative outcomes.
Minister, we've seen some pretty high numbers of people who have been in segregation for more than a year. Till next spring, what can we expect for them right now until we see the report in spring 2017 for their condition and for their segregation?
So,
Sorry, I don't know if you speak French, but if you can.
I'm sorry, I cannot. I can't do that, but I can answer your question. You had said fairly high numbers. Was there a specific number that you were referring to?
600 and something, according to some media.
Okay.
And according to your website as well, it says 7%.
7% of the population in the institutions, correct. So everything that can be done, we want to be able to take that action while the work is going on, and obviously being mindful of recommendations that Mr. Sapers can bring forward as soon as possible after the 60-day report. We have taken some action to date. October 17th, I made a series of announcements that relate to, or a series of measures that can be implemented today and have been implemented. But we are going to continue to work to improve the conditions of anyone in segregation in the province of Ontario. Clearly, certain conditions were identified that are unacceptable, and we need to work to improve those conditions for anyone that is in custody in the province of Ontario.
Give us an example of one recommendation that's something you said to the carceral, to the detention centers.
I'm sorry, I can't quite hear you.
Give us an example of something a message that you gave to detention centers, exactly what they should stop doing right now.
So the mandating of segregation as a last resort, and that this not be a practice. I mean, we have, you know, you've pointed out the numbers. We certainly acknowledge that. This is a systemic challenge, and we want segregation to be used only as a last resort when there are no other viable alternatives. That may not be the frame of mind that folks are in the ministry at this point, or have been up to this point. So that's a clear direction in policy in terms of limiting the use of segregation. That more effort be taken to find alternative strategies, resources, and locations within an institution short of segregation to provide the supports that individuals would expect and that we expect to be provided in our institutions. We've also, and I've also indicated that we are limiting the number to 15 days as opposed to 30 for disciplinary segregation, which is important as well. The weekly segregation review committee that will review why an individual is in segregation at every institution is something that is very, very important to having people focus on. And we're talking about, to some extent, a shift in thinking in terms of how segregation is used, why it's used, and what other supports can be brought to bear to help the individual get the access to services that they need while they're in the institution. So this involves also, and we are currently working with the Ministry of Health and the Attorney General when we talk about doing everything we can to accelerate the time that it takes for an individual to actually go to court and have their day in court, as opposed to being in our institution for lengthy periods of time, But our task, obviously, we don't have control over that. That's another ministry's responsibility, and I know that Minister Naqvi is working on that. But what we need to focus on from our perspective, and of course that does involve working with the Attorney General and obviously the Ministry of Health, but while an individual is in one of the institutions in Ontario, how can we improve the conditions for those individuals, especially those that may need to be in segregation? And to be clear, as I said, segregation as a last resort and only when all other viable options have been exhausted. But I also want to be clear on this point as well, that there may be instances where an individual's own safety or the safety of others is a large part of the rationale for why an individual may be in segregation. We have an obligation to ensure the safety of everyone that is in our institutions, and we take that responsibility very seriously. How much is the review going to cost?
The ministry's going to provide some resources.
So there will be resources provided and supports through our ministry. It's approximately $330,000 per year, is what I can tell you, for a minimum of 2 years and a maximum of 3 years. And so you can see by the time frame that we're committing to that the government, myself, our ministry, is committed to ensuring that we address the broad systemic issues in corrections by immediately acting to bring back information within 60 days, but not to simply scratch the surface of this issue, if you will, to do this in a way that is very in-depth. And that's where we're relying on Mr. Saper's expertise. We did not feel that it would be helpful if this was a very short, superficial type of review. We wanted to ensure that this review was one that was in-depth and analyzed a broad array of issues across the correctional division of our ministry. And again, I'm very confident that Mr. Sapers has the expertise to be able to do that. And so no one should leave here with the impression today that we're not serious about this issue, and in terms of resolving the challenges that we face in our correctional system, many of which are long-standing and are systemic. And so we need to address the root causes of many of the challenges and concerns, and also work with other ministries, because this is a multi-ministry type of approach in the terms of integration, in particular with the Ministry of Health and the Attorney General. And I know that without presupposing what Mr. Sapers may conclude, I have some sense that there may be some recommendations and some commentary that would be broader than simply our ministry and the supports that are required here. So again, a detailed, in-depth analysis, fully independent. I want to also make this point very, very clear. Mr. Sapers has acted as in his capacity as the investigator for Canada with respect to corrections, and I fully expect that Mr. Sapers will give us his unvarnished opinions that will form the recommendations and that we can act on. And so, again, Mr. Sapers has all access to information within our ministry, supports from our ministry and correctional staff, and we look forward to a very objective, frank report that will come from Mr. Sapers. And so it will be completely and truly independent and third party.
Last question, guys. If there is one.
This might be a really dumb question, but are you still also the federal correctional investigator, or has that role ended?
Not as of New Year's Eve, no.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great.